Hello and welcome to the Big Tree podcast with Adarsh and Adam. We have a special guest on our podcast today, Dan Weston, the analyst who has worked with Punjab Kings in the IPL earlier and now works with a lot of teams actually, Leicester, Share, and I think Manchester Originals. In this episode, we are going to discuss different teams in the IPL auction, which is going to happen on the 24th of November in Jeddah. So, starting off, what are your thoughts on the auction as it happens right now? The general thoughts.
Yeah, no, so good to be on here. Thank you for having me. It's actually Birmingham Phoenix in the 100, not Manchester Originals, and I'm not a Leicester anymore either. But yeah, no, Birmingham Phoenix is my main team right now in the 100. Been there for about 5.5 years now. So yeah, right from the start of the
Oh,
tournament, and
sorry, sorry. I was.
looking forward to the challenge of the future as well in terms of new ownership and maybe IPL ownership buying a lot of the teams as well. So it'd be fascinating to see.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry for mistaking your name, the team's name there. Uh, so
No
coming
worries.
on, yeah. So coming on to the main teams, like if I come on to RCB, they have retained Virat Kohli, Rajat Patidar, and Yash Dayal. They have around 81 crores left. So who do you think are the main players who they're going to be targeting in this auction?
Well, great question and a good starting point, I think. Look, RCB coming into the auction with a bigger purse than most. They've traditionally, as a franchise, gone for a very batting heavy squad and batting heavy spending. I think as well would be important to say. Um, they should really look to change that. I think, and probably look to recruit some high quality bowlers, particularly given the fact that they're playing their home games obviously at Chinnaswamy, which is a ground which is a very
Yeah,
high scoring home venue, and uh, I think that they've often just hoped that their batters were going to get them through it. Well, actually, I think they need more than that. So I think they need to look to target some real frontline bowlers. I think losing Mohamed Siraj potentially, if they don't use right to match on him, is a big blow.
yeah,
I
definitely.
expect him to go for around 9.5 to 10 crore at the auction, and they could well look to use the right to match on him, or because I think him and Arshdeep Singh are probably the two proven domestic pacers in the auction pool. You could argue Mohammed Shami as well, but
Yeah.
he's obviously had a lot of fitness problems recently and is certainly getting older. So actually, there's not that many premium quality domestic pacers to go around. I think RCB really
Yeah.
do need to invest in at least one of them.
Yeah, definitely. I picked up on a couple of points there. I think, like you mentioned, they tend to go very heavy on the batting fronts, and KL Rahul is someone I think I've seen a lot of talking around that he's going to go for
Mm.
a massive price for RCB, and they're going to go all in, or Rishabh Pant, one of them. And I think that, like you mentioned, they should not have let go of Siraj. I think because 14th, even if he asked for a 13, 14 CR, do you think that could have been uh, a price which they could have offered to him, considering he's one of the only Indian pacers going around, premium Indian pacers?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of speculation about Siraj's role in terms of the retentions, and I think sometimes it's always tricky to know like the reasoning behind why a player wasn't retained. Was it a franchise decision? Was it a player's decision? Was there a difference in opinion in roles or finances? We never really know the truth
Yeah, yeah,
unless the team says. Very, very, very rare that a team will actually be as open as to say why the retention didn't happen. Look, I've seen some speculation that someone at RCB said that Siraj wasn't the type of bowler that they wanted, which for me it makes no sense at all.
yeah,
I
exactly,
think he's I think he's exactly the type of bowler
definitely.
that every team in the IPL needs, basically, especially when you're looking at such scarce resources. Is it a move from RCB where they tried to be really clever and it could backfire on them? Quite possibly, and I think that they've got a lot of things to prove in terms of constructing that strong bowling lineup, which has generally been a big issue for the franchise over a long period of time.
Yeah, on constructing the bowling lineup, they have a few overseas pacers who they could go to. I looked at Mitchell Stark, obviously, Kagiso Rawada, and I think there are a few others. And in the spin bowling department, you have Chahal, Zampa, and apart from that, I didn't see too many bowlers who I think they could target who are going to be in the first 11. So,
Yes, Stark's an interesting one on a general basis because I wonder if he's registered for this auction because he has to. Because if you don't register, then you can't register next year
yeah,
or the year after, and that's a factor. I expect him to sell for good money. Would I want to spend good money on Mitchell Stark? I'd have my doubts because I think apart from some isolated matches last season, he had a very uninspiring season at
yeah,
KKR, and also there's that doubt that he's actually going to turn up for season in season out. And when you've got a mega auction ahead of a mega auction, part of that sale price for players is going to factor in the fact that you've got retention rights on that player for 3 years. Well, if you've got no guarantee that that player's going to turn up in those 3 years, then that is a big drawback
yeah,
for
definitely.
player. And for me, would constrain the value in terms of the core that you'd want to spend on a player with that dynamic. So for me, I'm uneasy about Mitchell Stark. In terms of spinners, well, obviously they did have Chahal before and released him ahead of the 2022 mega auction.
Yeah,
And then they picked up Wadinda Hasaranga as a replacement and then let him go too.
yeah.
You mentioned him. You mentioned trying to think who else you
Zampa,
mentioned the other
Adam Zampa.
Zampa. That was it. Yeah, well, Zampa's had a really good year. Very very impressive in the 100 when I was working in 100 this summer. I also think that there are a couple of other spinners that are definitely worth watching out for. Are Noor Ahmed, who
Yeah,
I think could end up being a real superstar, and a younger Afghanistan spinner as well, Ala Ghazanfar as well. I think has bags of potential and could end up being one of those players where there's a little battle for actually in this auction. I have my model kind of expects him to go for quite a few multiples of his base price. So let's see what happens there. So there's a couple of other sort of lower level in terms of price at least options for RCB and
yeah.
the other franchises with overseas spinners.
Yeah, and I agree with that on multiple fronts. But just to sum up the RCB conversation, I think that what I got from Andy Flower and Mo Bobart on this year, the 2024 IPL, was that they were looking to prepare seaming wickets, which were around 170, 180, or at max 200, and they're going to have a pack of fast bowlers, and they're going to outbowl the other team, and that's what I got. And was that what the message which was sent across to you as well?
Well, look, I think it's admirable, an admirable target to do that, and I think it makes a lot of sense in theory. I don't think you can control the Chinnaswamy to be like a 170 par home venue because of the boundary dimensions. But I take the point for sure about having a strong bowling attack, which I think is a non-negotiable when it comes to constructing a T20 squad. The problem is that there's not an abundance of high quality pacers available in this auction. You've probably got
Yeah,
five premium, I would say, probably, including a couple of overseas, maybe a Rabada, you might throw into as an overseas premium pacer. Obviously, Arshdeep Singh, but Arshdeep Singh, I think, is going to go for huge money and
yeah,
possibly even up to around that 20 crore mark. Um, then you're looking at some other players who they've had in the past. Harshal Patel, they've had
yeah,
Chahal as a
definitely.
spinner. And these are players that they've chosen not to keep. So, actually, where do they go from there to build that high quality pacer bowling lineup? I think, or just high quality bowling lineup. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to do that. And I'm actually really fascinated with their approach because if they want to bring back a lot of their existing players, the Maxwells, the Will Jacks,
Yeah,
those type of players as well from the batting group, then they're going to potentially constrain themselves about how much money they can spend on that bowling attack, which makes their problem even more difficult.
yeah, definitely. And just on the captain front, I think that's still not decided. But people were saying Virat will be the captain in the next season. So in that front, do you think it would be wise for them to spend, say, a large amount of money for someone like Shreyas Iyer or KL Rahul or Rishabh Pant, like 20 to 23 crore, if that reaches that would be wise for them.
Well, look, the captaincy market is going to be a market that I think is going to be so difficult to predict in this auction. I think that there's a real opportunity for some players to cash in on that because there's a real scarcity of proven captains. Now, for me, if I was at RCB, I'd do whatever it took to get Virat to captain again because I think it just solves a really obvious
Yeah,
problem with the
definitely.
franchise, and it means that they don't necessarily have to overpay for someone who's a proven captain in the auction. In terms of those three players that you mentioned, Shreyas, I expect to go for around 14-ish, maybe, but he has a very volatile price dynamic actually. I think in this auction, so look, it could be bigger than that if people are really fighting for captains, or DC want to invoke, not say, if DC want to bring him back, or KKR want to invoke the right to match
Yeah,
clause on him. There's a lot to consider with his pricing. Personally, I don't think that he's a good player to suit the Chinnaswamy. Certainly difficult for him and KL Rahul, I think, to play as the Chinnaswamy as a home ground, especially in
yeah,
the team with Kohli, unless Kohli kind of reverts back to his second half of IPL last year, where he was
yeah,
much more positive against spinners in particular. A typical Kohli, if he wants to play that anchor role, I have a huge fear for RCB if they have a KL Rahul in
yeah,
particular with that at a high scoring, high par home venue. I just think it's really difficult to see them succeeding with that strategy. Well, with Rishabh Pant, I mean, Rishabh Pant's a world class player. The
yeah,
problem with Rishabh Pant is that I expect him to go for more than every other player in the auction by some distance
yeah,
in terms of the cost. So, yes, RCB do have a lot of money, but they're going to be paying at least a quarter of their purse for Rishabh Pant alone.
yeah. Yeah, and just coming on to, you said that Kale would take up a lot of, he would bog down the RCB team, and I agree with that if he were opening. But I had an interesting proposition where he'd be batting at, say, number 6, 7, playing the role of Dinesh Karthik. I think that he could do that because I think he has the ability to do that, and he's done that for India as well. I think in the 2019 World Cup for a couple of
Yep.
games.
But why would you spend 15 crore or more on a guy batting 6 or 7 who doesn't bowl?
Yeah, that definitely is
That was
true.
my problem with that.
Yeah, that is true. So so we expect basically Virat would be the best guy to captain RCB then in that situation.
100%, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So now coming on to Chennai Super Kings, we definitely do expect them to buy Jimmy Anderson because that's what they do. Yeah.
Reduce the average age a little bit.
Yeah. uh, so they have retained Shivam Dubey, Dhoni, I think Pathirana, and who were the other two players? Gaikwad
Like
and Jadeja, I
Jadeja.
think. Jadeja, yes. And so there, I think their makeup is, they have kept intact their main core, and I think they're going to be looking for a lot of overseas players. What do you think?
Yeah, well, they clearly are going to need a lot of overseas players, having retained 4 domestics. And obviously, those 4 domestics are going to create the core of their squad in terms of domestic group. Um, I think they're pretty nicely balanced in those retentions in terms of skill set. You've got an opening batter, you've got a finisher, you've got a middle order spin hitter, you've got a left arm orthodox all rounder, and a death bowler. So actually, they've got a lot of bases covered with those
Yeah,
retentions. I think CSK are going to be a team who, we know what we're going to get with CSK. They value loyalty and consistency of
yeah,
selection and consistency of recruitment. Will they look to bring back a lot of their original players? Quite possibly. Could they look to target a
yeah,
Devon Conway, for example? Might they want to look at another experienced spinner in Ashwin? Could they look to reinvigorate the career of Devdutt Padikkal, who could be a lower price than I think a lot of people expect at auction? Will they look to bring Rachin Ravindra back? There's a lot of options for them in those sort of
yeah.
first 4 sets that they could look to build on that decent core that they've retained.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that they'll be looking for someone to replace Dhoni's image in the team. And I think that maybe Rishabh Pant is the guy which CSK have their eyes on.
Well, they're going to have to spend a big chunk of their budget if they're going to do that. So, look, I think that if they did get a Rishabh Pant, I think that would seriously constrain their spending
Yeah,
in other
definitely.
areas. I'm not so sure about Rishabh Pant going to CSK.
Okay, I thought that myself because I had seen a lot of people saying that he was being groomed to play at CSK, but maybe not, and maybe they're going to target people like they may, like you said, they're going to target Devon Conway and people of those sorts. But from a spin bowling perspective, apart from Ashwin, do you think they're going to go hard at Chahal or Krunal Pandya or maybe Rahul Chahar? Are these players going to be on the scope for CSK?
I don't think Krunal Pandya is a good fit for them because they've already got Jadeja who plays a similar role.
Yeah.
I can definitely see Ashwin being a target. I can definitely see them looking to bring back Ravindra as a kind of batter who bowls a little bit of part-time spin, and I could definitely see them looking to try and bring Tikshana back as well potentially, which will be I think a reasonably astute purchase at not a huge price. So they do have some options there for sure in that spinner market. Obviously, having with Jadeja, that determines their future strategy. As I said, left arm spinner may not be
Yeah.
quite as valuable for them as some of the other teams, but yeah, I'm sure they're going to look to pick up one or two at least.
Yeah, definitely. And who's the player who you think is going to be the most sought after by CSK in the auction? Just for everyone, the most amount of money they're going to be willing to spend on for CSK.
Well, they've got 55 crore, which kind of places them broadly in the mid range of teams in terms of budget.
Yeah,
Um, I don't like to really specifically go for players to teams, but I think Ashwin is a good fit for them. I
okay.
don't see them necessarily spending like 10 plus crore on many players at all. I think they might look to spend between sort of 3 and 8 crore on a lot of players rather than one or two like real marquees in terms of the big money. I just think
Yeah,
Ashwin is a really good fit for them, and what they try and do, how they set up at home, I just think it
yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so a typical CSK-ish auction is what we are expecting from them. Um, coming on, yeah.
Consistency in owner and coach, it just makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. Coming on to Mumbai Indians, I think that they too have retained most of their core and they're going in very solid to the auction. I think they have the best retentions in the entire list in the all group of teams. So, what do you expect of them in the auction?
Well, I have to strongly disagree with you, unfortunately.
Oh,
I think that the they've made the same mistake as they have in the past, whereby they've retained players on name and brand value necessarily, as opposed to expected output over the next 3 years. I think Rohit Sharma at 16 crore
yeah,
is a pretty poor
definitely,
purchase,
definitely,
pretty poor retention in terms of expected performance over a 3 year cycle. Um, his
definitely.
non-boundary run production now is
Yeah,
not great at all, and that has the potential to hamper whoever's batting with him as well. I think Sky Bumrah absolutely fine as
yeah,
expected. Tilak Varma I think is a bargain at 8 crore, and I think that we've seen in the recent internationals that again he's a player of huge
yeah,
talent. Um, but Hardik Pandya again, things are a bit of an unknown quantity moving forward. In that, I look at Gujarat, and I think Gujarat are worse without him, and Mumbai are worse with him. That was
yeah,
what I saw from last season,
yeah,
and they've spent a hefty chunk of their budget as well. They've
yeah,
spent. They've only got 45 crore left to spend at auction. And again, they've been very, very batter heavy with their retentions. Arguably, you would say four batters or three batters and one batting all rounder. And then just Jasprit Bumrah, who, I mean, he's always doing the heavy lifting for this
yeah,
franchise. And
definitely.
and who knows who they're going to try and pick up at the auction? Are they going to try and bring back Ishan Kishan, for example? Might cost ballpark 13 crore, something like
Yeah,
that. And then suddenly they're, I think, what did I say? They had 45 crore now becomes 30 crore, something like that.
Yeah.
And they've got to spend most of that on bowlers, and they're not going to be able to do it yet again. Are they going to go back for the Jofra Archer project? I don't know. He's a late inclusion now in the auction. So I think Mumbai have got to be really careful with how they spend in these early sets in the auction. Otherwise, they could leave themselves really struggling to create a strong bowling attack. And this is a mistake that they've made
Yeah.
a lot over the last cycle, or last 3 year cycle.
Yeah.
And it really, honestly, at the moment, their retention show to me that they haven't learned from those mistakes, or they're not willing to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
If you look at the players on paper, it's not bad, but are they going to create 11 individuals rather than a team? That would be my concern.
Yeah, and I agree with you on Rohit because I think he's been a non-performing asset for a number of years now, and I was just speaking of Bumrah and Bumrah, Tilak Verma, Sky, and Hardik to an extent because I know what you're referring to. He was not really good with MI last year, and yeah, I think that Rohit is a bad proposition, and for them like you mentioned, they can't go heavy with anyone like bringing back. I think they have this policy of one. They obviously have the slogan one family, so they want to bring back everyone who they had earlier, but in this range, uh do you think that for their own brand image they might want, say if Hardik is not going to perform next year and there's going to be a lot of booing, then they might even be ones who would be looking for another captain, and I don't think that Surya Kumar Yadav is a long term proposition for them. So
I
are
think he
they?
wants to be, from what I read, though. He's very keen to be captain.
Yeah, I know that.
Uh,
Definitely.
yeah, and it's interesting when we talk about Mumbai Indians and the concept of branding and marketing, because their owners are like some of the richest people in the world. The money they'll make on marketing or branding is nothing compared to the prestige and
Yeah,
the joy of being in the
definitely.
IPL. And so, actually, I have no real understanding as to why they would want to focus or even think twice about branding or marketing. It should just be all about winning this tournament.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. And so is has Trent Bolt registered for the auction? I think he has. So he
Yeah,
is a
has,
pacer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think Bolt and Rabada. I think a couple of these likes of bowlers, Hasaranga. I think these bowlers can be on the scanners for Mumbai Indians.
Well, Bolt or Rabada, I think it's going to cost them 10 to 12 probably each. So again, that would be a big chunk of their budget, but I think a necessary chunk of their budget. They've got to be very careful and very clever about how they spend this last 45 crore.
Yeah, and are they going to? Do you think they are going to bring back their bowlers? Because who was that guy? I don't exactly remember. Akash Madwal. Yes, Akash Madwal. Do you think they're going to spend money to bring him back and possibly Nehal Vadera?
Yeah, well, Vadera is someone actually who I think will get bid on a lot at the auction. I have him selling for 23 multiples of his base price. So I think he's going to be someone there's a lot of demand on, which might make it tricky for Mumbai for sure to bring him back. Akash Madwal, I expect to go for like 3, maybe. There might be a good option for them, and I think did they have Anshul Kamboj
Raghuvanshi.
as well? Yeah, a Cambodge last year as well.
Yeah,
So he's someone else who I expect to have a lot of bids as well. So it might be quite tricky for them to bring back some of their what I would call lower profile players that they've scouted quite effectively, and they might end up being priced out of them in these later sets when, if teams are smart, the ones with the bigger budgets, by the time it gets to say a Cambodia in set 19, that Mumbai might not have the spending power by that stage.
yeah, definitely. And now coming on to the team with the bigger budget, Punjab Kings. So they've
Mm.
gone all Punjab on this one, and they have retained only two players. And the most surprising bit in it for me was not retaining Arshdeep Singh, because there has to be some sort of player disagreement to the contract, because there's no way you don't take Arshdeep Singh. What do you think?
It's a really interesting one, because obviously we don't know the reasons as to why he wasn't retained. Was it a franchise decision? Was it a player decision? Did the franchise just not want to pay 18 crore for him?
Yeah.
which is what they would have had to have paid for that retention. Did they think they were going to get him back cheaper at auction? I think they're going to be disappointed if they did think that, because with the new RTM rules as well, I think it's going to be highly unlikely that we see much discount on 18 crore for Arshdeep Singh. I see him going for maybe 18 to 20. I think would be pretty realistic. Um, and yeah, look, I, I I think he's such a representative part of the franchise as well at the
Yeah.
moment. In the last few years, that Punjab Kings doesn't seem right without Arshdeep Singh.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, Other like they're obviously going to be looking for a captain. So who do you think is going to be the best fit out of the available captains in the market?
That's a great question. Look, I don't see many standout captains
Yeah,
at all, and I don't
they
generally
could make
in
Maxwell captain again, right?
cricket anyway. I mean, Ashwin captain would be a fun
Yeah,
concept because he just thinks so differently to everyone else in cricket, and I think that's to be applauded, and I love the way he thinks. Look, they've got the biggest budget. They've got a coach now, a new coach, Ricky Ponting, who worked at DC.
yeah.
I just think it's a great fit for Rishabh Pant to go to Punjab Kings.
Rishabh Pant. Oh,
Could they go? Could they get Pant and Arshdeep for 40 to 45? Quite possibly.
yeah. Okay, so they have Pant, Arshdeep, so that's about 80 crores left. Who else are they going to be looking at? I'm looking at a few overseas pace bowlers, say Mitchell Stark. Mitchell Stark, I think, is going to be on their radars. In the batting fronts, you have players like obviously you have in the Indian batting front Ishan Kishan and a few other players in there. So
Yeah,
I think they can
I
go. I think they could go really, really. The auction could go really bad for them in the sense that they could buy a lot of marquee players and then not have any money left. I think that's a possibility with Punjab as well, and then they'd have to buy a lot of uncapped players or 20 lakhs base price players just to fill out their squad. I think that is a possibility.
so I think that it's so fascinating because obviously they've got the most money, they've got the least amount of players retained, and a new coach.
Yeah,
Now that screams to me volatility at an
yeah,
auction. And if we look at the first sets, 5 6 sets of the auction, we see a lot of players who have got a connection with Ponting or the franchise. Shreyas Iyer, Rishabh Pant, Kagisa Rabada, Arshdeep Singh, all in the first set.
yeah,
Liam Livingston, KL Rahul, Mohammad Shami in set two. In set three, Aidan Markram,
yeah,
David Warner. Set four, Ashwin, Mitchell Marsh, Maxwell, Harshal Patel, bring him
yeah,
back. And in set five, Johnny Bairstow and Jitesh Sharma. So there's what's that, 10, 15 players there who have got in those first 5 sets out of like 30 who have got a tie in some way to the franchise. Could they end up being really active and busting through that purse in the first 5 sets? We can't rule it out.
yeah. Definitely. And with Punjab, I think uh, that's the gist of it. And how do you think they'll fare in the auction? Just from a Punjab, like you have seen Punjab going in previous auctions. So do you think they are going to be able to construct a decent team, or is it going to be the similar kind of thing we have seen over the years, where they buy a lot of players who are very big names but not necessarily suited to the conditions?
Look, I think I want to reserve judgment until I see their auction table. Who's on the auction table? I have a lot of doubts. I have a lot of concerns, and I've seen how Ricky Ponting has recruited at Hobart Hurricanes, for example, in Big Bash, and it's not at all inspired me.
Yeah,
Will the franchise look for certain players to help them with branding? Possibly. And none of these things contribute into a winning team.
yeah.
And this is a big concern at me. I'd like to see them do well, but I really have my doubts.
Yeah. Coming on to the Kolkata Knight Riders, I think they've done a decent job at retaining players. I think they've retained Russell, Ramandeep Singh, Narayan, uh, and Rinku Singh. Am I right? Or
Yeah, and also Harsh and Varun Chakravarti as well.
yeah, Harshit Rana and Varun Chakravarti. So obviously they're also going in without a captain, and I think that Joss Butler could be on their radar in this auction.
Look, KKR I think have had a really good retention
Yeah,
window. Obviously, having been successful last season, it's going to be pretty. It's pretty obvious that they were going to look to try and bring back the core of that squad. They've done that. I think that the two players uncapped players at 4 crore, Ramandeep and Harshit Rana,
yeah,
brilliant pickups. Really helped them in that goal of retaining 6 players and not not being completely in a bad place with spending. For example, like they've got 6 crore more to spend than Mumbai,
yeah,
10 crore more to spend than Rajasthan, and 6 more crore to spend than Sunrisers. So I think they're in a pretty decent position. If they want to go for a Butler, who I expect to sell for like maybe 15, I think that that's their only real big purchase. Does that mean that then they can't get a Shreyas Iyer? And actually, look at those two players in the first set.
yeah,
We don't know which order they're going to get drawn out on, and actually, that could change a great deal.
yeah.
If Shreyas Iyer comes out first, do they try and take him back, or do they try and wait for Josh Butler?
Yeah, I think that Shreyas Iyer not going there, and I think this has been discussed widely in the Indian media as well, that it was something to do with his pricing, and I think he wants to go at around 20 to 25 CR. That was that were his expectations.
Well, he's being very ambitious. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think his market price is that level. I'm not saying that he can't go for it, because there's a scenario where teams really overvalue captaincy, and it could happen. But I think that he's being very ambitious there with that pricing.
yeah. I think they're going to target overseas pacers as well, and in that, obviously, they had bought Mitchell Stark last year, and I have a feeling that they're going to go after him if he's in the low to mid 15, 16 CR around that range.
I expect him to go for that kind of price, so or roughly around that kind of price. So yeah, let's see there be a bit of saving of lot from last season's valuation of him for sure. But again, that pacer market is so scarce. There's maybe
Yeah.
5 really high quality operators who have proven.
Yeah. Uh, Coming on to Sunrisers Hyderabad, obviously, like they have also, I think they have had, if not CSK, like, or who was it, MI? I think if not MI, then they have had for me one of the best auctions as well. They have retained, I think they have retained Travis Head, Pat Cummins, and who else was there? Nitish Kumar Reddy, and I think there were a few other players, but they have managed to retain the gist of the players who had done really well for them, and they have a method which is clicked for them. So, what do you make of their auction prospects in this year's auction?
Look, I think those 5 players were always likely to be retained. You've got Travishek, the 2 openers, Travis Head and Abhishek
Yeah,
Sharma,
Abhishek Sharma, I
who
forgot him.
so well for them last season. Heinrich Klaassen, they wouldn't have wanted to lose, but they've paid a hefty sum for him.
Yeah,
Pat Cummins, captain, and Nitish Kumar Reddy, who's the next big thing in terms of Indian all rounders as well. So you've got 5, I think, really clear, obvious retentions. I think their biggest challenge now is to pick up some Indian talent at reasonable prices without paying a massive premium for it, because they've only retained 2 domestics and 3 overseas. So that's something that they're going to have to focus on with their remaining 45 crore. How do they get some really good domestic players? Because they're going to have to play 6 of them,
yeah,
because with the impact sub, there's 6 domestics that have got a feature in addition to Abhishek Sharma and Nitish Kumar Reddy. So they don't want they don't want these players to be like the 30 lot guys who they pick up at the end. They've got to be competent and strong players. So they've got to have an eye for a bargain. I think in the domestic market, there will be bargains that do exist. They might have to be patient as well.
yeah. And also, I think that like I mentioned Krunal earlier, but I think Krunal might be Krunal, Ashwin, and I think Rahul is on the market. So I think they're going to be looking at these three spinners and could spend around 8-9 crores on them. What do you think?
I think that would be Cornell. I don't see as necessary for them. I think it goes against their team
Philosophy.
identity, which was so
Yeah.
attacking with the bat. And I also think that Abhishek Sharma can provide that kind of serviceable matchup left arm orthodox spin as well.
Yeah.
So it's not a must have for me. Um, I think they're going to have to go and shop a little bit more in the bargain basement for domestic players and look at maybe some what I call distressed assets, some players who have ability but maybe have had a couple of bad seasons and market
Yeah.
value isn't as high as it used to be. Could that be? I don't think they will go for him, but the type of player like a Devdutt Padikkal or a Talva Taide who should have got a lot more opportunity in
Yeah.
PBKs.
Mohammad Siraj.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to be too expensive for them.
Oh.
Mahipol Lomraw, guys like this, guys who've shown that they've got talent, but it just hasn't really clicked for them in the last year or two, and they might look to bring those kind of guys in.
Yeah. So SRH, I think that they're going to stick with their own philosophy, and it's going to be much of what happened last year. Coming on to the who was I coming on to? I think, yeah, coming on to the Delhi Capitals. So they have retained who have they retained? I think they've retained Jake Fraser McGurk. Oh, have they
No,
retained?
no, no,
They haven't,
not,
right? They haven't.
not,
Let me just check.
they
Let me
took
just.
Akshar Patel and Kuldeep Yadav, so they retained two spinners domestically. Abhishek Perel from the batter group, and then overseas Tristan Stubbs.
Yeah. So those are their five retentions, and are they going in with a captain? I don't think they also are looking for a captain, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because they let go of Rishabh Pant or
Yeah. So they let
yeah,
go of Rishabh, and from what I think I saw a tweet from Rishabh today where he said that it wasn't about the money why he left Delhi. So I think he's not going to be taken back by Delhi. I think. Looking at the people who they could look for, I think Ishan Kishan, I think he was there at Delhi earlier, so he could be a potential pick for them.
Ishan Kishan could be in terms of skill set comparisons to Rishabh Pant role. He's probably as similar as it gets.
Yeah,
Left batter, wicket keeper, can bat sort of various positions in the top 3 or 4. I think that makes sense.
yeah,
Delhi go in with a little bit of a bigger budget than most teams. Only RCB and Punjab have a higher budget than DC. So yeah, that's definitely scope to consider in Ishan Kishan. Where they go with the captain, do they try and get Shreyas Iyer back? That could
yeah,
be a
definitely.
consideration.
Yeah,
Definitely, potentially possible with that one. They've got their spinners taken care of. The first team spinners taken care of. A couple of batters. They want to. They would do. They want. They're going to have to focus on some paces, definitely, in terms of the early spending.
yeah,
Could there be a rival for Deep Singh, for example, with PBKs?
yeah. And Jake, like I mentioned, I mistook Jake Fraser McGurk, but do you think that they could go look? They could try to get him back because he was really successful for DC last year.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely could be a consideration. I would just worry for them about spending too much money on batters early in the auction, leaving them short for some paces later on.
Okay. Coming on to the Rajasthan Royals, so they've also pretty much retained most of their core, and from whatever, like the thing which stood out most for me was the price at which Dhruv Jurel was taken because I think he was a bit oversold in that regard.
Very much so. I mean, I thought her market value was like maybe half that of
Yeah,
the 14 spent on him. The other retentions in terms of the domestics, the top end took care of themselves. Sanjay Sampson, Yashashvi Jaiswal, and Rian Parag were obvious retentions. There's no way that RR would want to lose Rian Parag after backing through the bad times and now getting into the good times. I was really surprised at the other three, though. I thought Hetmeyer just was unnecessary retention, and
yeah,
the 11 crore was in excess of what his market value
definitely.
would be. by quite some distance.
Yeah.
Sandeep Sharma, I don't think would go for anything more than 4 crore at auction. I think less. Don't forget, in 2022 at Punjab, we actually picked him up, I think, at 50 lakh, which was his base price, and I think he was unsold a year later. So 4 crore for him is quite a stretch. And obviously, as you mentioned, Dhruv Jurel going for 14. So they've got spending issues at the
Yeah.
auction. Definitely going into the auction with the smallest purse at 41. And look, what I've seen from RR over this last 3 year cycle is that they're a team who like to get their business done early.
Yeah.
If we look at last year's auction, they bust a lot of their budget on Rotherham Powell, first lot of the whole auction, leaving
Yeah.
them a bit strapped for cash after that. Go back to the 2022 mega auction, and they end up burning a lot of money quickly, and then having to pick up 4 base price, well, broadly base price overseas players right at the end,
Yeah.
just a free for all. And they're clearly a team that likes to do the business early. They like having certainty, but that comes with advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages that they've now only got 41 crore left, and I think it's a real stretch to see them challenging for
Yeah.
the bigger names and the bigger prices at the auction. Guys like Pan and Arshdeep and
Yeah.
Josh Butler and Mitchell Stark. Rahul Dravid, as the head coach, has discussed a lot about bringing back as many players as possible. But
Yeah.
I think he actually might really struggle to do that because I see
Definitely.
Butler going for like 15,
Yeah.
Chahal going for 12, 13. And if they were to bring back those two, for example, they can't really spend any money on anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and coming on to Butler, I think that was the major news with the Rajasthan retentions. And do you think it was the right move for them to not retain Butler, or
I mean, we don't know the ins and outs of the
yeah,
decision in the competition between franchise and player, but if you offer me Josh Butler or Shimmer and Hetmeyer to be retained at 11 crore, I take Josh Butler all day.
yeah, definitely, and I agree with that. So Rajasthan, who do you think are going to be the main people who they are going to target, or at least who are the people who they could afford to target in the auction?
I think they can at max afford one big player,
Yeah,
and then they're struggling. And I think that they will try and target one.
yeah,
Certainly from the first couple of sets, could that be a Butler? Could it be a Chahal? Um, could it even be like a Livingston? Bring him back to the franchise.
yeah.
I think they're going to look to pick up someone in the first 2 sets for decent money, and then they're going to have to scrap value after that.
Yeah. So now coming on to the Lucknow Super Giants. So they haven't retained KL Rahul, and so they are also looking for new a new captain. And obviously they've gone in with a few retentions themselves. And I don't think that that's overly surprised anyone. What did you make of their retentions, and what are your thoughts on their auction prospects?
Yeah, so KL Rahul, obviously, it looked like there was some form of conflict between him
Yeah,
and the ownership group towards the end of last season, and maybe that marriage had run its course. They could look at captain, but they could also think that Nicholas Puran can step up and do that job. I'm not a massive fan of overseas captains because of the fact that you've got to pick them even when they're not playing well. But I think Puran is good enough to not worry about that too much.
yeah,
So he could be. They don't necessarily have to look at a captain. That might be a nice to have, but I think Puran could do that job.
yeah,
I think that if we're looking at the other players, they've been one of the few franchises that's prioritised some bowler recruitment, which is quite nice to see.
yeah,
So they're gonna, as a franchise, they've always been one that kind of wasn't really full of batters that I would like to pay to watch. You know,
yeah,
a lot of grinders in their team in terms of non boundary hitters, basically,
yeah,
or low boundary hitters, and I wanna see them excite me a little bit more
yeah,
this cycle and target some more attacking players. They've got 69 crore to spend. That ranks them fourth in terms of budget.
yeah,
Could they look to a Rishabh Pant, a Joss Butler, Liam Livingston, Harry Brook, Jake Fraser McGurk, these type of players, aggressive batters who come in the early sets? That would be fascinating to see.
yeah. Just not from a team's point of view, but just from Rishabh Pant. I think he's going, like you said, he's going to go for a lot of money. But from what I
Yes.
observed this year, I think he was not exactly groundbreaking. I think he was scoring at around 140, 130. What was his strike rate? I don't remember, but he was not really breaking apart the charts there. And I had a feeling that yes, he was recovering from a very bad accident, but he did not look as good. And even in the T20 World Cup, I don't think he had very astounding returns. So I maybe he's going to sell for a lot of money, but I don't think that he has a lot to justify it on, especially on recent form.
You might be right. I actually thought that his comeback season after that serious accident was pretty impressive. I think that the talent wise and the upside wise, his ceiling
Yeah,
is extremely high. And I think ultimately people are going to value the captaincy experience and marketability. They'll probably pay a little bit for the left-hander wicketkeeper premium as well. Um, Look, I think it's pretty clear cut for me that he'll be the most expensive player at the auction. I'd be quite surprised if other people were more expensive. Maybe Arshdeep would have a small chance of being more expensive, but I think that I would say with 90% certainty that Rishabh Pant will be the most expensive player at the auction.
okay. I think a lot of people agree with you on that. And now coming on to the Gujarat Titans, so they have retained Rashid Khan, Shubman Gill, Sai Sudarshan, Rahul Tewatia, and Shahrukh Khan. So they have also gone for a very decent, like retaining all of their core. I think Gill and Rashid Khan were decent, like they were obviously going to be retained. And apart from that, I think Shai Sudarshan was a good pick, and Rahul Tewatia is one I think they shouldn't have gone for, in my opinion. What do you think? And on their
Okay,
auction price.
so I think the first bit of credit that you have to give them is for getting Shubman Gill as a second retention. I think that he'd be first retention at pretty much every other team.
Yeah,
So that was a huge positive for them. Getting Rashid Khan as first retention was obvious, no brainer, standard as it gets.
yeah,
Syed Sudarshan, good prospect, and who can definitely still kick on over this next cycle.
yeah.
The Rahul Tewatia pick, I think, has actually makes a lot of sense to me, primarily
Whoa,
because he's just a player who's done the business for this franchise and won them games, won them coin toss games over the past. And I think that the franchise wants to keep faith in him for that. And I can understand why. And qualifying as an uncapped player as well, 4 crore is just cheap. It's cheaper than they paid for him in the mega auction 3 years ago. Put it that way. And then Shahrukh Khan as another uncapped player. Look, I think now we're getting to the 4 crore being kind of the market value for Shahrukh Khan after he's gone for more money in the past. A number 6, number 7,
yeah,
who at this level doesn't bowl very often. I think that he has a cap of in terms of pricing. I think we're now getting to a realistic level. Um,
yeah,
but they've gone with primarily batting retentions. Out of those 4 retentions, only Rashid Khan is realistically a bowling option for them or a frontline bowling option for them. So they're going to have to focus on some bowlers, and
yeah.
they've got 69 crore to do it with.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think that we have wrapped up the auction teams conversation. Now coming on to the entire thing of auctions in and of themselves,
Mhm.
because I think that for the IPL going forward, and this is my opinion, I think obviously the auctions exist to provide a fair playing ground for everyone, and so that weaker financial powers don't get bullied, and that has done a good job at making it a very competitive league. But I think that going forward they need to have some sort of transfer league system, especially with, I think a lot of people said that capping overseas players salaries at around 18 cr was infringement of trade regulations around the world. And I think that there might be something to do with that, and they'd be best moving forward to that. What do you think about that?
It's a really good question. Look, I love the auction. I think that the a 2 day mega auction is, especially day one, is as good a recruitment spectacle that you could possibly
Yeah.
wish to see in anywhere in the
Mm.
world.
Yeah.
And I would be sad to say goodbye to the auction. I think, as I say, it's a fantastic event and something that I love to watch or be involved in. Whatever, well, I'd rather be involved in it than watch it, but I'll take watching it as well because it's a great event.
Yeah.
Um, I like it in terms of the pricing mechanism ensures that the player valuations are kind of as pure as it gets. So
Yeah.
you're not forced to put players into arbitrary brackets like you do in a draft. However, it does have disadvantages as well.
Yeah.
One being that the 3 year auction cycle maybe reduces the incentive to produce young players
Yeah.
and for teams to set
Yes.
up an academy,
Yes.
because they could invest a lot of time and effort and money into a player's development, and then comes to the end of the cycle and they can't retain them and they end up losing them to a rival team. So somehow I'd like to see a tweak involved where you get a benefit for producing your own players. I don't know how to do that off the top of my head, but I'd like to see an effort made to for that to be the case. Now, the only other option I really think that you could have is if you switched it to a complete like Premier League football
Yeah.
transfer system,
Yeah.
whereby you have you can you have different transfer windows and free trading is allowed. The problem is then you've got less transparency in terms of player pricing, and then you've got potentially some teams can outspend other teams as well, which maybe reduces the level playing field that I think we see in the IPL a lot, and which is I think a great feature of the tournament too.
Yeah. For me, why I am batting for transfer system in the IPL is for two reasons mainly. Like you mentioned earlier, I think that it's going to create a brand for the team because they're going to basically value. There's going to be a attachment with players, so you're not going to just leave players out and at an ad hoc basis regularly. And second, I think that cricket does not value the players as much as they don't get the fair share as they should. I think the purse, if the auction has to continue, has to be a lot more because I think AB de Villiers or someone mentioned that they spend around 7% of the IPL revenue on the players, whereas with all other leagues it's around 50-50 or 40-60.
Yeah,
So I think in that regard, if it were a transfer system, then the players could get what they perceive as their fair value. Because I think if it went to a transfer system, someone like a Jasprit Bumrah, he'd be making money similar to Messi or Ronaldo on a global scale.
probably. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it will be fun to see that, right?
Yeah. Oh, so what do you think about that? Like my question was that basically players say that they don't get enough money or they're being shortchanged in this regard by the auction.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it. I've seen the comparisons between cricket and other sports, and it's difficult to ignore the fact that the cricketers are paid a lower percentage of revenue generated by teams than other sports. And yeah, maybe that does have to change. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people who will be keen for that to happen, and a lot of people who will be trying to prevent that from happening as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now coming on to analytics on in sport, because like you're one of the best analysts going on Twitter from what I have seen. And so what do you think about the growing role of analytics in cricket, especially because I think it's a very underexplored theme in cricket, and you just have people recruiting very high profile coaches and boards like the PCB like hiring a very expensive coach, but you don't really know what they're doing with it. They're hiring $500,000 mentors, but what is their role? I think Jared Kimber did a podcast with
Yeah.
with Shoaib Malik, I think, and he couldn't explain what his role was. So I think someone like you, or maybe a good analyst, would provide a lot more actual tangible things to which you can have performances on the back of, and I think that's lacking a lot
Yeah.
in cricket.
Well, obviously, I agree with that because, like I say, I think that if you're looking at uh, expected points per game increase from having a good strategy team compared to say, well, as you say, a random mentor ex-player guy who's just getting paid a load of money and we don't really know what they do. I
Yeah.
think that the analyst and the analysis side and the strategist side is much better value.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at the moment, the people running the teams have to take responsibility for these decisions, and they have to understand that actually there are different ways to construct a management group than what people are currently doing, and that these random high profile ex players perhaps don't have all the answers.
Welcome back, Adam, from your 1 hour sabbatical. How did it feel not speaking anything for an hour straight?
I liked it really. It was great to listen to you two. It was really kind of him to do that. I thought someone who's a respected analyst and works for a number of franchises and worked in county cricket to give up his time. That was like an hour of his time just to speak to us. I thought that was really impressive. I think it said a lot about him, and it was there was a lot of substance in what both of you were saying. So I think if anyone wanted to know more about the IPL or the IPL auction or the teams this year, they'd do well to listen to you two talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that with him coming on and not really, like, we are not very established podcasters just yet,
No,
and doing us a favor in that regard was a really good thing. So shout out to Dan for that. And I'd
yeah,
recommend
very kind of
everyone,
him.
anyone, any potential franchise hirers, anyone listening, just go out and check his profile because he's a really good analyst. Now coming on to a very sacrilegious topic for both of us, most aesthetic test 11 of all time. The rules are that you can only pick one player from one country. So I'll go with my 11 first, and then
Okay, yeah.
I'll let you make your own 11. So my 11 is Cameron Bancroft, Shubman Gill, Shea Hope, Aiden Markram, James Wins, Litton Das, Sikandar Raza, Akila Dhananjaya, Logan Van Beek, Fazal Haq Faruqi, and Mark Adair. I know it's going to be hard for you, but what do you make of that 11?
That's a good one. What made you pick Mark Adair, by the way?
Because I couldn't really find anyone else from Ireland who was as aesthetic. I think he looks aesthetic while bowling.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's definitely true. I think. So you pick you. Oh, that's funny. We've got a good contrast here because I just picked the bowlers who I found interesting when they were batting.
Okay. So what's your 11 then?
But unfortunately, I've got more than one for each from each country, so I've done it a bit differently.
Yeah, so it does not matter. You can just go as
Oh, phew.
yeah.
I went to open with Vaughan. I don't know if I don't know how the kind of average age of the people listening, but
Yeah.
a lot of people will remember who know Vaughan now as a commentator or someone who tweets. And I
Yeah.
think for lots of Indian fans, and even for English fans, he's a bit kind of controversial or kind of almost a bit tabloid in his comments.
Yeah.
Um, but as a player, he was such a good batsman. He was so graceful. His drives, his cuts, his pulls, they were excellent, and he really was great to watch as a player.
Yeah.
Um, I went opened with him and Joe Denley. Now Joe Denley's another
Yeah.
one who he looks. I mean, he never really got in. I think his highest score for England was a 90,
Yeah.
but he looked
92.
so good. It was a 90. What was it? 90?
92, I think 92.
92. Yeah, so he looked so good. He was so compact in defence and attack,
Yeah.
and he could play more defensively in tests, and he could play attacking in T20.
Yeah.
And he looked really good. He looked like he
A
didn't have any,
statesman.
but obviously he did.
Yeah.
Um, James Vince at 3, because I think he's one of the best looking players of all time. Again, I'm talking about in his shot selection.
Yeah.
I think he only got one international 100 for England in a 50 over game against Pakistan. But he was also a good slip fielder and captain. I got Sachin Tendulkar as well. I just thought I had to include him because he was so good, and I used to like his shots. I remember a lot
Okay.
of his and everything.
A straight
Um,
drive. Yeah.
Straight drive, that was it. Yeah, and Mark Waugh. Mark Waugh. I know we mentioned him
Okay.
last under different circumstances, but
Yeah.
good player to watch at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, he might be maybe a lot of younger listeners won't remember him. Ian
Yeah.
Bell, another one I mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. Like, he has to be in there. I didn't
Yeah,
pick
he
him.
was a great, he looked really good, really fluent. I've gone. The keeper's a difficult one. I just went for Stewart because I loved watching him as a kid. He used to do all these pull and hook
Okay.
shots that looked
Okay.
so good against really express pace bowling.
Yeah.
And then I went for bowlers who I like my tail enders to be completely useless. So I
Yeah.
picked some that were really fun to watch because they couldn't bat properly. So I picked Courtney Walsh as one of them because he had this really funny leave. It was so exaggerated. He would just stand up and really bring his arm up as he left it, like it was like avoiding being shot or something. Matthew Hoggard, because he just had like one or two shots, and one of them was this like really exaggerated forward press. I think Duncan Fletcher had taught him it, and he just
Yeah.
kept doing that all the
Yeah.
time. So when he was a night watchman, he would just do this forward
Yeah.
press. Pommy and Bangwa, I think I remember him. He'd hardly get any runs. I thought I'd have someone from Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
and Murali, who just always entertained me as like a number 11, just for his kind of strange shot selection. So it was the Tailenders was a bit more of an entertainment one.
Okay. So your 11 stacks up very differently from mine. I'm just going to go through the justification for
Yeah.
everyone. I'm Bancroft. So people are going to think I'm very controversial, but I think that Bancroft is one of the best looking players I've seen. Not obviously not just cricket wise, not
Yeah.
otherwise, but just cricket wise, he's one of the best because when you look at him, how he bats, he's very organized. He plays those covered
Yeah.
drives. I think there was this one spell where Jimmy Anderson got the word over him and he was just all over him. I think this was in Adelaide, the day-night test in 2017, and even then Bancroft looked good, and that was what was to me that he looked really good. And Shubman Gill, I think if anyone's watched Shubman Gill bat, he's very pleasant on the eye, and he's a
Definitely.
languid batter, very tall, hits the ball very sweetly, and yeah, he's an I like to call him eye candy.
Yeah.
Shea Hope, because I remember the 2020 England tour where he was cover driving everything,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
balls which he didn't cover drive, he used to get those sweet little 20s and after that get out, and those 20s were things which I'd want to pay money to watch again. So
Yeah.
yeah, he's in there for that reason. Aiden Markram again, I think that's a global pick. Everyone would agree that Markram has one of the best off drives in the world. The off
Yes.
back foot punch, and he just he is very tall, languid, and he has a good pull shot as well. James Wins, like, how much can we go on about James Wins? And he captains our side, actually, both of our
We should
sides,
have
I
him on the
think.
show one day.
Huh?
We
Yeah,
should have him on the show one
yeah,
day.
definitely. He's going to be our cult hero. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so he's our captain, and there's nothing more that needs to be said. I saw the 2017 Ashes where the first time I saw him, and just seeing him at that time was, I think he was the first player who I was only watching for aesthetics, and
Mm.
even apart from the fun bit, he has a really good technique, and obviously he
Yeah.
used to get out for really cute 20s or 30s, but
Yeah.
those 20s were really good. Liton Das, I just picked him because I didn't know a good looking batter from Bangladesh. They
Yeah.
all have very weird techniques, and so he was the only one which I thought had a decently organized technique. Sikandar Raza, same thing. Akila Dhananjay, again, same thing, because with Sri Lanka, can you think of someone from Sri Lanka who looked really aesthetic, a batter, a lower order batter? I really can't.
Mm. Not aesthetic. Obviously, there's loads of good ones.
Yeah, just aesthetic.
Yeah. No. The thing is
Yeah.
that you can think of people like Jayasuriya and Sangakkara, but I deliberately didn't have any left-handers. I always think they look a bit kind of sinister when they bat too.
Yeah, definitely. And then I had at 8 Logan Van Beek because I don't know any other players from Scotland or Netherlands, so I just picked him for that reason. And Fazalak Farooqi, I think he actually has a very good action, and
Yeah.
from Afghanistan, they have all very fruity actions. You have Rashid Khan, who is a really good bowler, but he's not very pleasing on the eye when he goes through his action, and other ones too. So I think Fazalak Farooqi from Afghanistan and Mark Adair, like I explained, I think he is going to be in there. So those that was the justification for all of my players. And
Mm.
so coming on to the topic of evolution of T20 cricket, because I think
Mm.
we were both really keen on discussing this.
Mm.
There's the possibility of T20 cricket just changing how it's played today, and people just going out bashing the ball all day long. And I think you have a few points to get out on this topic.
Yeah. I mean, from where it started, it's almost like a new kind of a different sport in of itself, isn't it now?
Yeah,
Because it's the balance between bat and ball on the whole is not like a fair balance, is it? It is mainly like a batting game, and I think boundaries have become a kind of almost a bit devalued in a sense that when you go to see these T20 games now, you just expect them. It's like a single or something,
Yeah,
and it's not a big deal when someone hits a six.
yeah.
And that's how the game's evolved. So it doesn't mean it's bad or anything. It's like it's almost like a different sport completely. And when I see things like the Abu Dhabi T10s, there's a Sri Lanka T10 coming. I wonder if T20 will eventually get a bit shorter. Is that possible? Or do you think it will always be 20?
To me, I think that 20 overs is the real sweet spot for everyone because,
Mm,
like, even with football, like, it's 90 minutes. They don't go out
mm,
to 45 minutes. So I think T20 cricket will, like, we say Test cricket is the premier format, but with the
mm,
money making thing, I think T20 cricket will always remain at the helm of there. And I think, like you mentioned, in the sixes hitting, I think this was a big topic in the 2024 IPL, the sixes,
yeah,
where the power score was around 220, and people were like, what, that should not be acceptable. And
yeah,
I think that's a view that I echo as well, because you want to have a place where 180 can be defended at least, and in the IPL it looked like even 200 couldn't be defended.
mm,
So I think that's not a future what we want for T20 cricket. Like, you have in Test cricket, pitches are getting really bowler friendly. In
yeah,
India, you have really spinning
yeah,
pitches. Even Australia has gone to really seam friendly pitches in Test. So you don't
yeah,
want T20 to be the complete opposite. You want to have some sort of balance in there, and from what it looks like I think India scored 270 plus on 3 occasions against South Africa,
yeah.
and that just does not seem like it to me. It looks a bit like a circus to me. And if it, I think the sweet spot for T20 would be somewhere around, or on the lower end around 150, and on the higher end around 240. I think it should not go more
Yeah.
than that.
Because I remember when it actually first came out, and I'm that old, in about 2003.
Yeah,
Was it in the county championship, and no one was getting 220, 230, 240 there or anything. It was like kind of 140, 150 was a good score.
yeah,
So the way it's developed in these 20 years, it's been amazing. Also, the one good thing about it, I think, is it has brought spinners into the game as well more than you would have
yeah,
found. We used to have in those limited overs competitions a lot of these medium pacers that were just bowling basically Yorkers all the time. But those guys are an endangered species now. You don't want someone that they'll just get smashed out the ground. So there has to be some kind of skill. So like a wrist spinner is very handy, or a good off spinner. Um, you can't just be bowling a Yorker every ball or a slower ball all the time. You'll get found out now.
yeah. Uh, and also now, a point which I asked Dan about, I think the transfer system with the
Mm,
auctions in the IPL, like the
mm.
auction, they have the auctions right now in the IPL, but what do you think about potentially having the transfer system like I'd mentioned to Dan earlier?
It, I think it would almost be inevitable if we had this situation that people are talking about, where we've got a bit of it already, where one kind of franchise owns a number of teams over in different countries. And so it would make more sense then to have a kind of a transfer system where you can actually own that player for a year or 2 years or whatever, and he just plays for the side in India, England, South Africa, Australia, all for the same franchise, and they can actually own him. Um, I think I think that's probably where we're heading, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, I think the same because yeah, I thought the meeting was over. Yeah, I think that's where it's heading. But with India, I don't think India is going to be. Indian players are going to be available for other leagues anytime soon. Maybe there's going to
Mm,
be a possibility where retired players, not current players, are going to be allowed to play. But really, I
okay.
don't think the IPL would want to dilute its value. But again, like I mentioned in an earlier podcast, I think
Mm,
people like Mukesh Ambani and other people are going to have more power than the BCCI, because if they
mm,
own if they own major parts of the cricketing calendar, and in say someone like Mukesh Ambani owns the TV rights for ICC,
mm,
owns the TV rights for the IPL,
yeah,
owns most of the IPL teams everywhere across the globe. So isn't he going to be the most important person in world cricket right now?
yeah. You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so and he'd want that. He'd not let the BCCI go on top of him, and I think that could be a positive thing for cricket. So what were we talking about? I just forgot the context.
They're just talking about the transfer system in franchise leagues
Yeah, so I think that
rather than an auction.
someone like Mukesh Ambani specifically, he could be one who'd really bat for the transfer system, because I think you know that he's the one of the richest people in the world, and he's the
Mm.
richest person in Asia. So he could be saying, well, change it because he could have the financial might to acquire the best team for the
Because
Mumbai
could you,
Indians.
if you take that, I think it was the Delhi Capitals or the owner of the Delhi Capital or one of them.
GMR Group.
Yeah, they took over Hampshire recently,
Yeah.
and so if we use our James Vint example, could they just own James Vint? So rather than him being auctioned or in all these different leagues, he's just owned by that person or that group, and so he plays for every single franchise that they own.
Yeah, I think that eventually the all the different IPLs have to merge into one entity. Like you
Mm,
could have obviously one part of the IPL played in India, one played in England,
mm,
one played in
yeah, yeah,
Australia, definitely. But I don't think this system can work where you have all these different kind of leagues which are basically different kinds of IPL. You merge
yeah.
them all in a single entity and have it on different places. I think that would be the way forward. And yeah,
And
I
if they
think
extended the IPL anyway, even without that, would it be more sensible to have transfers rather than an auction? If it lasted for another few more weeks or another few more months, would it
yeah,
make the transfers more likely or less likely?
yeah, more likely or less likely. I think it's more likely. I think
Mm,
in the there were a lot of talks of abolishing, not having the auction for 2025. So yeah, I think that's something, and they're definitely looking towards it. And there are reasons, like I mentioned to Dan, about player revenue sharing. What do you think about that aspect of not giving players their deserved share? And I think cricket players are heavily underpaid, especially in the IPL, because the IPL is the second most money rich league in the world after the NFL. It makes more money than the Premier League, and it does not give even 1% of the money the Premier League is giving to the players.
that is amazing. I suppose you still get the very good players being rewarded, don't you? But I
Yeah,
suppose you could argue as a percentage, not as well rewarded as the footballers.
yeah,
There's also the impact it has on basically on every cricket nation apart from India, where a lot of the players could turn down central contracts just to get a contract at one of these franchises. They've definitely done that in Sri Lanka and the West Indies already, but it could happen to the rest as well quite easily.
yeah. Uh, Now coming on to a very highly debated topic
Mm,
with the obviously big thing coming up tomorrow, or
mm,
yeah, coming, no, it's already tomorrow in India. I don't, for other places, I
mm,
don't know. So the
mm,
Border Gavaskar Trophy, people are saying that it's bigger than the Ashes, or there's a lot of debate on that. So
mm,
if you had to rate global cricketing events,
mm.
how would you rate them in Test cricket?
In Test, I think as a series by itself, the Ashes is still bigger, just purely because of the history,
Yeah,
the 150-year history of it. Because even if both sides were rubbish, it would still be like a big event. I
yeah,
think with India and Australia, these are the two best sides. There's no doubt about that. So it's the best two sides playing, which makes it the most interesting game to watch. But if they weren't as good, the trophy wouldn't be as big. So it's all dependent on those two being good. I suppose a bit like in the past, Australia playing the West Indies
yeah,
in like the 80s or the 70s or 90s. So it's a bit like that. But Australia's changing now.
yeah,
It's looking more towards Asia as a country. Its demographics have changed, so it's not really just you know maybe 40 or so years ago even that the country was mainly made up of people from Britain and Ireland, and everyone had this similar surnames, similar first names. The country's a bit different now. A lot of Asians in there, a lot of Greeks, a lot of Serbians.
yeah.
It's a different type of country now. So maybe that link with England is diminishing. And I don't know for how much longer they'll have the royal family, for instance. That's another thing. So Australia as a country is changing. So I wonder if that kind of cultural change it goes along with the idea that now that the BGT trophy is taking over from the Ashes. But I think
Yeah.
at the moment it's still the Ashes, I would say.
Yeah. Do you think if India and Pakistan were to play a test series, five test series, do you think it
Mm.
would be bigger than the Ashes then?
It will be more watched than the Ashes, and the rivalry will be fiercer. But I still think the Ashes, just because it's the oldest one,
Yeah.
and it stands out as like a trophy by itself.
Yeah.
Um, I I think just as a test series, that's still I think the
Yeah.
biggest one. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that the sides in it are the best or anything. It's just the oldest kind of longest established test series.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, it's basically like most, if you have a big rival like the El Clasico, it does not
Yeah,
matter if Barcelona or Real Madrid are not doing very well at that time. It's still
no,
going to be very watched. And that's the
yeah,
same with the Ashes. Um,
yeah, definitely,
and with India Pakistan, I think if India and Pakistan played tests regularly from the start and did not stop playing tests, there could have been a point where India and Pakistan
definitely,
would have become as big as the Ashes. But
yeah,
if they abruptly started tomorrow, then it definitely won't be as big. If I had to rank it myself, it would be Australia and England, the
mm,
Ashes in England first. Then I have India and Australia second,
mm,
the WTC final as third,
mm.
India and England as fourth,
That's always
Aus-
very good. Yep,
England and Australia as fifth,
yep,
India and South Africa, Australia and South Africa, India and New Zealand, rest
mm,
England everywhere because England follow tests the most, and after that
mm.
India, Pakistan, and then the rest. What about you?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, England and India and England and Australia, these series are just too easy for the home sides.
Yeah,
But India and Australia playing in England are very good, tightly contested series. And funnily enough, even though India have been winning in Australia, I think they've only won once in the last 40 odd years in England as a series,
yeah,
despite sometimes going there as the better side.
yeah,
So that's always an excellent series at home. I've been to a few of them myself.
yeah,
Um, and they always produce good games as well.
yeah,
I
and a lot
think
of controversy.
yeah, yeah, no, they're great series. Yeah, I would put that up there. Australia and England's a great one. India and England. What about Australia? Australia and India. Um,
Australia
I
and
don't,
India. Um,
that's a bit one sided at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit one-sided, and I don't think that. Well, the BGT I think in India happened in 2023, and not a lot
Mm.
of people were very overly excited about it. Whereas if you
No.
see the Border Gavaskar Trophy in Australia, I can tell you it's everywhere in our schools. Everyone is
Mm.
talking about it, so it's definitely not similar because even though Australia have been by far most competitive, apart from New Zealand, who just achieved the unthinkable,
Yeah.
but Australia had been the most competitive, but it was not something like they'd come over and it'd be a massive thing. So no, I don't think that Australia and India is that big, but it definitely ranks above rivalries like uh, Afghanistan and New Zealand. Definitely ranks
Mm.
above those rivalries.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, and I think the West Indies Australia rivalry yeah goes back to West Indies Australia and West Indies England rivalry. People still tune in for those two series.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. That's a testament to how good the West Indies were in the 70s, 80s, and then part of the 90s. Because
Yeah.
now they're not the same side, but there's still a prestige to those games that if you just looked at it on paper, especially that West Indies batting lineup, you wouldn't really get excited about. But that name is still a kind of a good brand, the West Indies name. Um, and you just get loads of people saying, "Oh, isn't it a shame for West Indies cricket?" And so you still get that narrative about it. So it's the West Indies have done well to keep up that name and that brand, even though they haven't been a good Test side, I would say, for about 20, 28 years or something. I think they haven't won an away series apart from against Zimbabwe and Bangladesh since '95. I think, which is about 30
Wow,
years,
I
isn't it
didn't
now?
know that.
Yes, it's just they've only won in Bangladesh and Zimbabwe since then. So
Okay.
it's a long time, isn't it?
I don't really know why they've fallen so much because
Yeah,
is there that less of a following of cricket in the Caribbean? Because even Pakistan has fallen or Sri Lanka, but
yeah.
Sri Lanka hasn't fallen like the West Indies.
No, no. That's been so dramatic, hasn't it? Because they were so good. I suppose
Yeah.
that's what made it more dramatic, I think.
Yeah,
Because they
and
were like invincible.
yeah,
And then,
invincible and they have focused to T20 cricket. Like I don't know about the Caribbean, but
mm,
surely like there has to be obviously money has something to do with it. But yeah, I think money and the fact that the NBA and those sorts of opportunities are more for the West Indies. Anyways, I think
mm,
that this was a long podcast and we have discussed quite a few things here. We'll see you next Friday, I think, with whatever's happened with the India Australia game. So stay
yeah,
tuned for that. Till then, we'll see you again.
yeah, see ya.